Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. In this video, I'm going to show you the various ways I have house hacked so that I haven't had to pay rent or a mortgage in about 8 years. And buckle your seatbelts because there isn't just one way to accomplish this. It's time to get creative. If you are new here, I have created this channel to help you learn about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. I have traveled the world, I own a couple of houses in Spain, and I'm on a creative journey to financial independence. I believe the road to financial freedom can and should be fun. I hope you'll subscribe and join me on this journey, no matter where you are starting from. Okay, let's jump in. If you're not familiar with the term house hacking, it typically refers to various ways that you can use your home in order to make money. Most of my house hacking has fallen within this definition, and then some of it has just been creative ways to live rent-free. I'll break it all down for you. When I first started house hacking, I didn't even know what it was. One creative idea had grown into another, and I honestly can't believe that I'm looking back at 8 years of living rent-free. I want to quickly note that within those 8 years, there have been a few months where I stayed with friends and gave them a little money, and there have also been Airbnbs that I've rented around the world, but I have definitely made more than I've spent, so I just wanted to bring clarity to that. Another thing I want to mention is that not everything I talk about in this video is a cakewalk. Some of it required sacrifice, but knowing that rent or a mortgage is the biggest item you can eliminate from your spending, I get a lot of satisfaction out of knowing that I've navigated a way to avoid that. Other than finding ways to make extra money, house hacking has been the biggest game changer in my journey to financial independence. Okay, so let me get to my first house hacking situation. When I purchased my first home, I paid $195,000 and had a monthly payment of around $1,400 per month with an additional $400 in utilities and pool care. The house had 3 bedrooms, and I knew when I purchased it that I would need to get a roommate to keep my costs within what I could afford. I rented out one of the bedrooms for around $750 per month, which was great and meant that I got to build equity in a house while keeping my own costs at around $1,000 per month. Then I learned about Airbnb and thought I would give it a try. I had another bedroom that was in the house and was very small. I didn't think it would be much fun for anyone to live in that small bedroom all the time, but for Airbnb, it could be the perfect spot for someone. Because my roommate would have to share a bathroom with anyone who stayed in the Airbnb, I offered her $25 off for every week that the Airbnb was booked so that the situation would also be a benefit to her. I priced the room at around $35 per night with a $10 cleaning fee as well as discounts for longer stays. I knew from looking at other rooms available in the area that my price was just below what others were charging, and my house had a beautiful backyard with a pool and a dock overlooking a canal. Well, this plan worked out really well. I was booked pretty solidly for the entire time that I had the room listed. Let me tell you about the pros and cons of the situation. The first pro is flexibility. If I wanted to block off any dates because I needed a break or had a friend coming into town, I could always have the room available if necessary. The next benefit was more money. Every month I brought in more money from this small bedroom rental on Airbnb than I did from my roommate who rented a bigger room. My favorite benefit was meeting lifelong friends. One of the things I wasn't expecting was that I would end up having so much fun with my guests. If you love to travel and enjoy cultural experiences, then this is a great option if you have to be home most of the time. I hosted people from all over the world and I still stay in touch with several of them. I met a wonderful friend from Germany who I've met up with several times since that first time we met. I also made a great friend from India and another friend from China. Even though not every visit resulted in lifelong friendships, it was still really cool to host people from places like Scotland, Portugal, Mexico, and even more that I don't remember. Now, obviously, not everything about this was positive, so I'll tell you some of the not great stuff too. First, you probably need to be there. I work from home, so this was pretty easy for me. I'm sure there are ways that you can arrange room rentals if you won't be there, but in general, you probably want to be there when the guests arrive. You probably also want to manage the turnovers, which is pretty easy when you're just renting out a single room and bathroom. The next downside is that you need to keep your house pretty clean. This really isn't that much of a negative, but if you aren't a clean person, you'll need to figure that out. You can't have a bedroom clean for a guest, but have a messy kitchen or living room. room. Now, I would be lying if I told you that every experience I had was great. When it came to people renting rooms, there were never any dangerous or completely horrible situations, but there were definitely a few inconveniences on occasion. I'll give you a few examples. I had a guy from Canada book the room for over a month. He listed that it was only him coming, but 2 days before he arrived, he said he was bringing his wife for the first few days, which was fine. I allowed couples. When his wife showed up, my roommate greeted them and ended up calling me to come home as soon as possible. The woman had decided that my home wasn't good enough for them, and she let me know it. She ended up changing her mind, and we got to know each other, but she had strong opinions about my house and constantly told me how much bigger and better her house in Canada was than mine. Awkward. Another time, a guy came from Mexico to try to surprise a lover that he had met on a previous trip. He asked if he could bring that person to my house, but the thing was, he didn't know this person well at all. As it turns out, the rekindling didn't go so well, and I ended up kind of taking care of him through much of his trip, which was totally fine. It was just a bit uncomfortable at times, and I felt really bad for him. Lastly, there was an older man that came to stay for a few days from somewhere in the northern US. He and his girlfriend also ran an Airbnb. I spent an hour getting to know him when he first arrived, and he seemed pretty nice. I found it strange that he went on about how I don't have enough rules for my Airbnb. Who in the world wants more rules? But I guess that's how he felt since he runs his Airbnb with a ton of strict rules. Well, he ended up leaving me a not so great review, and reviews are one of the hardest things about Airbnb. It's impossible not to take them personally. I couldn't believe that someone I had spent so much time with would be so rude in his review. No matter how long I've run Airbnb locations, I'll never get used to this, but this one definitely seemed more personal because of the time we spent together. As you can see, there was nothing horrific that happened, but I just don't want to make it sound like it was perfect all the time. I would still do it over again. Overall, it was definitely worth it. Okay, it's time to talk about phase 2 of my house hacking, and this was renting out my whole house on Airbnb. You might be wondering what this has to do with free housing, but hear me out. I decided to travel the world and rent that same house I mentioned before on Airbnb, but the whole house instead of just a bedroom. Remember, my total bills came to around $1,800 per month, or maybe $2,000 a month with a high electricity bill. Renting the house on Airbnb meant that I made at least $3,000 per month. I started by renting it for $99 per night, but that was just to get my first reviews. I moved the price up slowly to $119 per night and eventually $139 per night. I kept my prices just below competitors and was booked around 95% of the time. Of course, this wasn't as easy as setting up a bedroom rental, but in the long run, it actually turned out to be less work. I was going to be traveling, so I had to get a lot of things ready. It took a couple of months of hard work, but it really paid off. First, I had to get the house itself ready. This included removing my personal items like pictures, changing out some of the furniture, and buying extra towels and sheets. I had to arrange a cleaning company, a property manager, a backup property manager, lawn care, and more. I also had to get the listing ready with photographs. I added a keyless entry lock to the door and also added a Wi-Fi controller for my air conditioner. All of this took a lot of work, but after that, I was traveling the world, and sometimes I wouldn't have to do any work for a month, and the business would be running just fine. There were a few times when I had to handle situations on the phone, trying to find a handyman or a pest control company, but for the most part, it all ran itself. Over the course of 1.5 years, I brought in over $50,000. This paid the mortgage, which was also building equity. It paid the bills and gave me an average of $1,000 in profit every month. That $1,000 was more than enough to pay for my Airbnbs across Europe while I traveled. I couldn't believe this was my life. When I came back to the US, I was making so much money on my house that I decided not to live there much anymore. I had bookings for months in advance. I stayed with some friends and went to visit family, but then I decided to see if there were any local house sitting opportunities. Sure enough, there was a couple who lived about 20 minutes from my house, and they were headed north for a couple of months, needing someone to care for their cats. They had a beautiful home on a huge lake, and I stayed for free at their house in exchange for watching their cats while I made a profit on my house. This was a great situation for me, but house sitting is also something you can do all over the world. I have used one site for years and highly recommend it. I always leave a link to it in the description, so if you're interested in house sitting, definitely check that out. After I bought a house in Spain, I sold the house that I owned in Florida. I still regret that. Even though I made a profit, it's now worth almost double what I paid for it. Anyway, I was traveling for most of 2019 and came home for a few months at the beginning of 2020. Well, we all know what happened after that. I was supposed to be flying back to Spain in early April, but COVID changed my plans, along with the rest of the world. I had already been staying with friends for those first 3 months of the year and felt it was time to give them some space, knowing I might be stuck for a little while. I ended up taking a job at a sports-focused boarding school for teenagers. This job required that we live on property to be available for the kids, so housing was included. I already worked a full-time job remotely, but was able to work nights and weekends for my second job. Even though COVID was hard for everyone, rather than being stuck at home, I made the most of it and earned 2 full-time salaries while living without having to pay rent or utilities. In the 2-year period that I was there, I paid off $50,000 in debt and began saving at a rate I had never been close to before. This was the beginning of working toward financial independence for me. It was hard work, but it would have taken 5 to 10 years to do the same thing if I had only been working my one job and having to pay rent. It was 100% worth the sacrifice. And why not? I couldn't travel anyway. Literally, the rest of the world had the slowest 2 years of their lives, while I had the most intense 2 years of my life. Well, I'm glad it's over now, but I'm so thankful for that transition point in my life. Okay, now, even though I had a really good experience as a homeowner renting out my house as an Airbnb, I didn't love the risk that was hanging over my head at times. For example, if something went wrong with the house, I could be out a lot of money in maintenance, or if there was a hurricane that destroyed the house, my whole mortgage could be on the line if I couldn't rent it out for several months. In early 2022, I went back to having one job and needed housing, so I wanted to get creative about living rent-free. I found a house listed for rent on Facebook Marketplace. The main house had 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. Attached to the house was another 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit that was completely separate. I reached out to the landlord and asked if they would be open to me living in one of the units and renting out the other, possibly as a short-term rental. He and the owner agreed. I couldn't believe that the first homeowner I reached out to was open to that without any reservations. There were going to be a lot of costs going into it, so I asked a friend of mine, who also needed a place to live, if she would be open to partnering with me on this venture. Both the main house and the small house needed a lot of cleaning and rethinking the spaces in order to make it nice. We decided to start by preparing the 1-bedroom unit to be an Airbnb. This took a whole lot of work. We painted almost all of the walls, scrubbed the tile and the grout, painted the old refrigerator with chalkboard paint, and furnished the entire place. It took about a month to complete everything. Once we had it listed, it started booking right away at an average of $100 per night. We've never looked back. We are making almost as much money on this little 1-bedroom unit as I did 5 years ago renting out my entire 3-bedroom house. Of course, we are 3 minutes away from a major theme park and it has a lake view, so it's not too shabby. We then spent time fixing up the main house and furnishing it. It turns out that buying furniture for a 4-bedroom house takes a lot of work and money. This is another area where we got creative. We purchased several gently used items on Facebook Marketplace. I also found a listing from a young man who purchased a house to turn into a rental. The person who lived there previously had died, and the young man didn't have time to do anything with the furniture left in the house. So he offered us all of the furniture in exchange for making sure that everything got taken out of the house and the shed, even the items we didn't want. Well, this was a big job, but it meant thousands of dollars of free furniture for us. We rented a van, took one huge load to Goodwill, and then took 2 or 3 trips of furniture to our house. There were several pieces that we didn't need for the house and were able to sell, making about $700. Once we had the house furnished, we each had a bedroom, but had 2 left that we could rent. Instead of trying to find 2 more roommates, we decided to pair the rooms together as a rental for someone who would like a bedroom and an office. We were able to rent this space out right away as well. I should note that we spent around $10,000 furnishing the house and paying the first month of rent and utilities without any renters. But for the last year and a half, we've both lived rent-free and on most months have made a profit between $300 and $1,000, paying ourselves back for the initial investment. I also want to mention one of the benefits of rent hacking. When something goes wrong with the air conditioner, the roof, with pests, the washer and dryer, or any other appliance or part of the house, all I have to do is call the landlord. We don't pay for any of that. So it's very low risk in comparison to doing this with a house that you own. The other nice thing is that we can get out of the lease at any time with a 60-day notice, so there is nothing too big hanging over our heads. The purpose of all of this isn't to give you an exact roadmap. Some of the things I've mentioned have taken big sacrifices, but they've all been worth it for me. No one will follow the exact same journey, but I do hope that it inspires you to think outside of the box in terms of your job, where you live, and what you do with your assets. Now, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to join me every day where travel and adventure build financial freedom. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.